Hey guys, how's it going? This video is kind of like a continuation of my video from last week where I went over my user interface and add-ons. In this video, I'm going to go over my macros and keybinds. Now these keybinds are what work best for me. There is no correct or incorrect way to keybind. You could take every key off of your keyboard and shuffle them around and just randomly pick one out and match it to any spell that you want to. It will not matter. What does matter is one, that you find a system that you're really comfortable with, and two, that you practice with that system enough to memorize what keys do what without looking or thinking about it. You should be able to put your hand on your keyboard right now and look away. And then, alright, press the button for Unstable Affliction. Alright, now Curse of Enfeeblement. Alright, Pet Attack. Now Spell Lock. Soulburn, Soul Swap. Unending Resolve. Alright, now go ahead and put your pet on passive. You have to be able to do all that stuff and keep your eyes on the screen and use your spells without looking at your keyboard. Alright, so the best way I could think of to do this is on the right hand side of your screen you're going to see a keyboard. And I'm going to make my way around all of my keybinds and explain my macros as I reach each key that they're bound to. Now my keybinds are set up with logic that makes sense to me. And what I like to do is group like spells together. Shift will always be my modifier to cast on my focus target, and Alt will always be my modifier to alter a spell. Sometimes it'll add a Soulburn effect, and other times it'll completely change the spell. Alright, so here you can see how I group my spells together. The orange ones are my channels. The bright green ones are my escapes and crowd control spells. The pink ones are my demon control abilities. The dark blue ones are all my damage spells. The purple one is Soul Swap. The light blue ones are my curses. The red ones are my defensive spells. The yellow are my target and focus buttons in Arena. And the dark green is where I threw my health funnel and healthstone buttons. And finally the brown is Banish, just because Banish starts with a B and I got used to it being there. Now see, some of these keys are split in half. That's because those keys have two different roles. Using the Alt modifier, it'll do something completely different. Now we'll get to that. The light blue ones, they're my curses. Now if I hold Alt and press those, it would Soulburn curse. But it's still a curse. The ones that are split in half will do two completely different things when I hold the Alt key down. Alright, so here we go. Escape. Escape brings up the game menu, but more importantly, it's my stop casting button for fate casting. You really need to get used to hitting it if you plan on taking the Kill Jaden's Cunning talent. I might make a video explaining why later on, but just know for right now that if you want to fate cast with the Kill Jaden's Cunning talent, you need to learn to hit escape in order to fate cast. Alright, so F1 and F2 are going to be my channels. F1 I hit the most, that's Drain Life, and F2 is Malefic Grasp. Now if I hold the Alt keys on those, F1 is going to Trinket, and F2 is going to cast Drain Soul. Now F3 through F6, they're going to be my crowd control / escapes. F3 is going to be my tier 2 talent, whichever I choose, whether it be Howl of Terror, Mortal Coil, or Shadow Fury. F4 is my Fear or Blood Fear macro. So I'll get to show you guys my very first macro here. You guys are going to see the same macro show up a number of times with just a different spell at the end of it. So I want to make sure I explain this very well for the first time. What this macro is going to do is make its first priority your mouse over target. If there is no mouse over target, then it's going to fear your target. And then if you want, you can use the shift modifier and hit the keybind, and it will fear my focus. So it's a very good macro to use that has a number of purposes, and it's so good that I use it on a number of my spells. I just turned into this macro. And then to finish off the light green buttons, F5 is my teleport button, and F6 is my summon teleport button. Next we have the pink buttons that I use to control my demon. The grave accent slash tilde squiggly line, whatever you want to call it, next to 1, that is my pet attack macro that you see on the screen right now. Now I've got two versions of this, one for if you have the Grimoire of Supremacy and one if you don't and you're still using the old pets. What this does is if you just press the button, it's going to attack your target. But if you hold in the Alt modifier and press the button, it's going to use a different ability depending upon which pet you have active. If you have the Fel Hunter or Observer out, it's going to silence your target. If you have the Void Walker or Void Lord out, it's going to disarm your target. And if you have the Succubus or Shavara out, it's going to seduce your target. Now I also have another macro set up to the Shift squiggly line keybind that will spell lock my focus. And then I also have a keybind set up to control squiggly line that will put my pet on passive to recall it. Now you'll notice that the one key is split in half. If I hold, like I said, if I hold the Alt key and I hit the tilde, it's going to silence my target. If I hold the Alt key and press 1, it's going to use Grimoire of Service, Fel Hunter, which immediately upon summon will silence your target. So I like to keep those buttons right next to each other, and all I did was grab Grimoire Fel Hunter out of the spell. I put it up, it's actually in my hidden action bar that you can see, and I bound it to Alt 1 so that I have both my silences right next to each other. And then Alt 2, I have keybound to Grimoire Imp, and what that does is as soon as he's summoned, he'll dispel a magic buff off of you. I haven't found any uses for the other two Grimoire pets in PvP yet, but if I do, I guess I would keep binding them to 3 and 4. And again, that's only while holding the Alt key for the modifier. Now Q is also bound to another pet macro that I have. What it'll do is if I have my Succubus out, it'll knock back, and if I have my Fel Hunter out, it'll devour magic. And I have two different versions of this, one for the old pets and one for the new pets as well. Now Q also has two functions that are completely separate from one another. If I hold the Alt key and press Q, it'll use the macro that you see on the screen now. Now this is a very important macro that will pop your PvP damage trinket and your Demon Soul or now Dark Soul ability. And you have to pay attention because the Dark Soul spell itself will change depending upon what spec you're in. Alright, so next I'd like to go over the Dark Blue abilities, and these will be very easy. These are just my damage abilities. For number 1 I have Agony, for number 2 I have Corruption, for number 3 is Unstable Affliction. Now being an engineer, I wanted a way that I could attach Synapse Springs to my Unstable Affliction spell without it being annoying, because every time Synapse Springs is on cooldown, I would get error messages popping on my screen saying it's not available, not available. So what I did is made this long ridiculous macro with the intent of hiding not just the error messages on the screen, but it also shuts up the game itself when it says the spell's not available, the spell's not available. So this wonderful spell will hide all the errors and shut the woman up from talking in the background. And if it's available to use, then it'll use it. If not, it'll just cast Unstable Affliction and you see no errors whatsoever. If you want to use the macro, all you need to do is change the hand item equipment that you have Synapse Springs bound to, and the spell if you don't want it bound to Unstable Affliction. And then number 4 I have bound to Haunt, and number 5 is my Fel Flame macro that looks exactly like the Fear macro that I showed you guys earlier. Again, mouse over is first priority, and then your target, and then if you hold the shift key as a modifier, it will Fel Flame my focus. 6 is bound to Rain of Fire, and then 7 is Soulburn Seed of Corruption macro that you see on the screen. This is mainly for rated battlegrounds if everyone's grouped up, and I just want to get a bunch of corruptions off really quick. Next one will be very easy to explain. W is my soul swap key, and if I hold the Alt button while pressing W, it will perform Soulburn Soul Swap. And in case you don't know, Soulburn Soul Swap will instantly apply Agony, Corruption, and Unstable Affliction to your target. Next we have the light blue buttons. E, R, and T are all bound to my curses. E is bound to my Enfeeblement macro. R is bound to my Elements macro. and T is bound to my exhaustion macro. And then if you hold in the Alt key while pressing each of those buttons, it'll perform the Soulburn macro version of each of those spells. Next we have the red spells. Now these are all my defensives. A I have bound to Unending Resolve. S is bound to Dark Regeneration. D is bound to Sacrificial Pact. And F is bound to Twilight Ward. Next I want to go over the green buttons, and again there's nothing special here. G is bound to Health Funnel, and H is bound to Health Stone. Next we have the yellow buttons, and these are all my Arena, Target, and Focus macros. There's nothing too special here. Z will target Arena 1, X will target Arena 2, and C will target Arena 3, and Alt-Z will focus Arena 1, Alt-X will focus Arena 2, and Alt-C will focus Arena 3. I intentionally left my V key blank, but that's my victory button. That's the button I press to plant the flag of ownership in an opponent. And like I said before, B is my Banish macro. Alright, here's where I tell you guys a few secrets about me and my clicking. There are a few spells that I click. For example, Summoning Infernal and Soulstone. Some others include the Soulburn Fel Hunter macro that'll instantly summon a pet if mine dies, and Soulburn Unending Breath, which will allow you to walk on water with or without a mount, or with any mount of your choosing. I also need to real quick tell you guys my mouse buttons. I still use my scroll wheel to move the camera in and out, just what I'm comfortable with. I click the scroll wheel to life tap. I also have two buttons on the side of my mouse where my thumb is. Hitting one of those buttons will place myself on auto run, so I can move the camera around and look behind me while I'm running in a different direction. And clicking the other will backpedal. And I know you guys are like, oh my god, you backpedal, blah, 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 blah. And I have an awesome macro for you guys. It's called /GoFuckYourself. I enjoy having the freedom to backpedal if I want to. I know not to use it in a PvP environment where I'm trying to run away from my opponent. I know that's slower than moving forward. When I'm not fighting someone, I like to goof around and move in circles and back up and do little flips in the air with my mounts, and it's what I enjoy doing, so fuck you if you have a problem with it. Anyway, back on topic, clicking shift and clicking either one of those two side buttons will cause me to strafe left and right, and holding Alt and clicking one of those buttons will tell my pet where to move, and clicking the other one with the Alt button will tell it to follow, so it'll come back to me. And just in case you guys don't know, that's very useful for if you see a priest running at you and you want to separate you and your pet from each other, so that way you both don't get AoE feared, and while you're feared you can still spell lock the priest. Alright, time for some miscellaneous macros that I have. This one on the screen right now will eject you from your mount. I use this because for a while there wasn't a button inside of Bartender to eject you from someone else's mount if you accidentally mounted with them. One time I was in like a 2.2 to 2.3 rated battleground, and I was the one supposed to go to Lighthouse and cap the flag, and I accidentally clicked on someone else's mount, and I was running and I was screaming, telling them to stop, eject me, and they weren't listening, and it was bad, so I'm never going to let that happen again, so I made this macro. Next macro will hide the errors on the screen, the ones that show up in the middle in red that usually say you can't do that right now. Sometimes they might annoy you and you might not want them on the screen, and you could just click this one time when you log in, or put this in front of another spell that you use occasionally, like to buff yourself, and when you click it, it will make sure that those red errors don't show up. Next we have a macro that will show you what coordinates you're at on the map. It'll display the information down in your chat box, but only you'll be able to see it. It'll have the zone followed by the latitude and longitude of where you're at. This was used a lot in vanilla. It was like almost mandatory if anyone wanted to find anything, a vendor, an NPC, a class trainer. This is what friends use to tell other friends how to find things. Since then the game's been dumbed down and there's guards in cities now that'll tell you exactly where to go. But for some reason I still like to hold on to this just in case someone is ever like, where's this at? And I can give them a coordinate. I don't know. This macro will move your camera distance out further than the game would allow. I don't know if that's still the case anymore. It was true back when this macro was first introduced to me. The last macro that I have here is a random mount macro. Now I know there are more complicated macros to do this out there, but what this one does is just picks any mount. Doesn't matter if it's a ground mount or a flying mount. It just picks any one of your mounts and puts you on it. So if you're going to use this macro, I suggest you're in an area that allows you to use any type of mount. For example, it would be a bad idea to try to use this macro in a battleground because you can't use flying mounts. Well, that's all I have for you guys. This video ended up being much longer than I wanted it to be, but I don't really feel like going back and cutting anything out either. Let me know if you guys have any questions about anything. I will try my best to answer them. Just leave me a message down in the comments, or like my Facebook page and leave me a comment on there too. I'm going to post every one of these macros down in the description of this video so that you can easily copy and paste them. And I hope that this video at least helps some of you out in your ventures into MoP. I'm probably going to take a little break from making instructional videos and focus a little more on just having fun playing the game and doing battlegrounds, and I'll post some good footage as I get it. Well, that's all I have. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.